This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Samantha Bennett with the K-State Radio Network. Iowa State livestock economist Lee Schulz begins today's show with the latest information for this week's cattle market update. He shares insight on the price increases seen in the market during the later half of last week and provides information on the USDA's new cattle contracts library resource. Today, we also discuss an exciting new internship program with the National Bio and Agro-Defense Facility, otherwise known as NBAF, as well as BioKansas. BioKansas President and CEO Sonia Hall and NBAF Communications Director Katie Pawlosky share information on the opportunities for underrepresented groups in STEM through this program. Internship focus areas available include animal science, cybersecurity, communications, physics, veterinary medicine, and more. We end today's show with K-State fisheries and aquatics specialist Joe Gerken discussing frogs and toads in Kansas. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. We are beginning this week's programming with our cattle market update for the week. And joining us for that this week is Iowa State livestock economist Lee Schulz. So, Lee, thanks for joining us today.
Glad to join you once again.
Absolutely glad to have you as always. And this past week was actually an interesting one for the markets. I feel like the last several weeks have been kind of, here or there, not a lot of movement going on, but things really took off this past week.
Yeah, you can say it really took our breath away. As you looked at Thursday's trade, we've seen live purchases up anywhere from $2 to $5 over last week. Very strong, really across the board. When I look at compared to the last week of March back in 2015, that was kind of the last highs we've seen in this cattle market with the last cattle cycle and the peak there. Realizing those prices were 167.57. We're at those levels and above now. So I think that gives us an indication that we're going to see some pretty strong prices going forward, both seasonally here as we get into April, May, which is typically our highest prices for the year. And then as we look at longer term, right, over the next couple of years, we're going to really push to that record territory. And really we can maybe look back of the end of March and the end of the first quarter of 2023 as really the start of that as we look at where prices were this last week. Futures prices really reacted to that too. We've seen very strong futures prices both in fed cattle and feeder cattle. Did see a bit stronger corn market here on Friday. We've seen the prospective plantings and stocks report is a bit bullish when we look at the corn market. So we did see some stronger corn prices. When I look at feed prices, I really start to like maybe later on here in 2023 and into 2024, as, I think we're going to see, if we see trendline yield, rather strong production. But really here for the next several months, I think we're going to see these escalated feed prices, and that's certainly going to be an impact on producers' margins and some challenges to work through. When we look at box beef prices, they're going to lag this rally we've seen in calf. So, we've certainly seen packer margins narrow over this last week as you've seen strong cash fed cattle prices and really pretty steady box beef prices. But, we expect to see the box beef start to pick up here as we get into this summer grilling. Unofficial kickoff has been baseball season this last week. And so I expect to see those box beef values start to increase here.
Sure, yeah. And you mentioned, we're starting at a high base price here. This is just the beginning of when we really see prices start to rally because of the summer. So where do you anticipate, what sort of extremes do you think will continue to kind of slowly climb after this? Or do you think we'll see a bit more steep increases from here on out?
Yeah, I'm going to use the choice select spread to kind of piggyback off that question. I've actually had quite a few questions about this over the last week here because we've really seen that choice select spread narrow from really some high levels we've seen to start the year. I think we started over right in that $27 per hundredweight difference between choice and select. We're down to single digits now. And questions of why have we seen that come down? Well, seasonally that happens here as we get into the spring. This is typically about the low point, and then we start to see that spread widen. And the reason why is if you think about carcass weights and cattle grading choice versus select, you do start to see that choice levels decline here as we get into the spring and early summer, and that'll help spur that wider spread between choice and select. Now, as we look at where we are historically in that choice select spread, we're a bit higher than we have been if you look at the 5-year average, for example. So that suggests to me that, we're starting from that higher base. We could see that spread get rather wide as we get into the next couple of months. And if it's anything like last year, that spread could really remain pretty wide throughout the year. Earlier I mentioned we expect high feed costs really at least until we get into the fall in 2024. That should certainly help keep that spread pretty wide between choice and select, as I think you're going to see fewer days on feed, especially with very tight cattle supplies and these high feed costs. You'll see really producers want to push those cattle out, and packers really want to purchase and receive those cattle. And so I think that's going to really help us hold those choice select spread as where it's at.
Sure, absolutely. That makes sense. And, as we head into summer and we've experienced this past year of rapid decline in our cattle numbers, do you foresee our cattle numbers staying stable from here? Because I feel like we've declined rapidly, right? The past year or so, we've seen a rapid decline in cattle numbers, a lot of movement in the feed yard. That's starting to slow down now. Do you think there's going to be, with higher feed costs, is that a concern that that's going to ramp back up again? Or do you think we're so small at this point, herd-wise, that there's not a risk of that?
Yeah, I think when you look at, last couple, I used to say months, but it's really been years, we've seen a lot of jockeying in those cattle numbers because, as we've dealt with drought really across much of the U.S., we've pulled a lot of cattle ahead. We put them in feedlots a lot sooner. I think that short term mitigated some of those impacts as we looked on feeder cattle supplies and fed cattle supplies. But you can't create more cattle, right, in the short term. And now I think you're starting to see those impacts of those supplies really start to tighten up. They're going to tighten up even more here seasonally as we get into the next couple of months, and are going to relatively remain tight moving forward. Realizing that producers are in the driver's seat here as we look at from a supply situation, very tight supplies, moving forward, likely going to get tighter before we start expanding. That's almost certain. And so, I think really taking advantage of opportunities in this marketplace to lock in profits, take advantage of that. Now, the only challenge is, we're facing these record high cost of production. And so, that is going to temper some of the profitability. We're going to see these record prices, but you're also overlaying that with record cost of production. So just as important to manage that side of the profit equation and those production costs. You got to start with feed. As we look at, I think there's going to be some opportunities to price feed as you get into new crop corn, and taking that into consideration is going to be important.
Sure. And Lee, we've talked about this next subject in the past before, but we wanted to touch on it again. The Cattle Contracts Library with the USDA. It's kind of a new tool that's been put out, and it's been in the pilot form for a while now, but now it's finally been released, right?
Well, it's still termed a pilot program, but you're right on point that, we've been talking about this for some time. Really you have to go back to last spring. USDA came out and said they were working on this program, planned to get it into the fall. It was ready, but there was some things we had to work through as far as collecting the data and getting that available. It was finally here released, and I shouldn't say finally. They moved tremendously fast to get this available. And so, we've seen the first report here at the end of January. They're going to release the weekly report. They release it on Monday for the prior week's trade. And, it's really a collection of about 18 packing plants submitting data, 4 packing firms submitting that data, represents a large share of the cattle being traded. And so we can look at it as, relatively good coverage of the contracts that are out there.
Sure. So the importance of this tool, where does it really stand in terms of its use now?
Yeah, so I think when you look at it, it's generally under the broad, stance of we want to get more transparency and more information in this market to improve price discovery, right? And so the Cattle Contract Library, I wouldn't say it stands alone, right? It's part of USDA's efforts to provide this information to stakeholders and producers throughout the industry, right? And so, how producers can use this is it's important for evaluating market conditions, identifying trends, monitoring patterns, and ultimately making better business decisions, right? Now, realizing that this is still a pilot program, it's relatively new. There's a lot of learning by doing. So that includes analysts like me. I think it includes, producers that are utilizing this information. We're still learning about it, still understanding how it can help us, and realize that a pilot program, eventually the money's going to run out. That means, it could become permanent or it could go away, and that's going to depend on funding and support. So, I know USDA is continuing to collect information from people, sharing, their opinions, sharing suggestions that they have for maybe altering this so we can really use it as a valuable tool, right? And so they want to provide the best information to producers that they can, but we have to remember that confidentiality is key here. So there's some things we maybe want to see or see it a little bit differently, but that might not pair with confidentiality. And so the ability to release it really ultimately ends on that.
Sure. And Lee, we're going to have to cut here soon. We've run out of time today. We just had so much to talk about. So I know you recently wrote an article about the cattle contracts library. So if listeners want to read more about it that way, where can they find that at?
That's available in various places. I would suggest first to try our Iowa State University Ag Decision Maker newsletter. That's a place that monthly you'll see a column on the livestock market. In that article, I provide a lot of history, but also a lot of detail about the contracts library and some ways in which we can help interpret some of the data.
Wonderful. Well, I'll link to that article as well as the actual cattle contract library itself through USDA. And you can find that in the show notes of today's program, which as always can be found on agtoday.net. But Lee, thanks so much for joining us today. I really do appreciate it.
Thanks for having me again.
Absolutely. Once again, everyone, that was Iowa State livestock economist Lee Schulz joining us for this week's cattle market update. We'll be back with more ahead on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. We are joined now by two special guests from some community partners here in Kansas, right down the street from us, really, here in Manhattan. We're joined by Katie Pawlosky. She is a communications director with NBAF, once again, right down the road from us here at K-State, as well as Sonia Hall. She is the president and CEO of BioKansas. So before we get into things, ladies, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. So like I said, we're talking today. There's a collaboration going on between these two really impactful organizations here in Kansas, and it's going to impact our students, hopefully, here at K-State. So I wanted to talk a bit about this new internship program that is being made available through BioKansas and NBAF. So Katie, what really inspired this partnership and these internships to begin with?
In short, our NBAF director, Dr. Clavijo, really saw an opportunity and a need. As the National Bio and Agro-Defense facility is standing up and developing its culture, he recognized that we need to prioritize diversity and inclusion of people from different backgrounds, lifestyles, and perspectives. And these are just really essential to our facility operations and future scientific excellence. So we're really excited. The U.S. Department of Agriculture NBAF has partnered with BioKansas to provide up to 15 paid internships over the next 3 years for students from populations underrepresented in those STEM areas, so science, technology, engineering, and math. And, these create amazing opportunities for students in general, but especially for underrepresented populations to contribute to and understand the significance of NBAF's mission.
Absolutely. Yeah. Key roles in a lot of them, honestly. 15 students, you said, will get to take part in this opportunity. So that's amazing. So those 15 students that, in the future will be taking part in these internships, what sort of roles will these interns be filling with you all?
Yeah, so these interns will work in several areas of NBAF that basically match their interests. So we have openings in animal science and pre-veterinary. We'll have several other areas of science, communications, graphic design, computer science, information systems, cybersecurity, math, physics, engineering, you name it. We really kind of do it all here at NBAF.
Wow, incredible opportunities for sure. And amazing that there's so many options to choose from. So students from all areas of, like you said, STEM will be able to take place in this. So that's incredible. And, students, I'm sure they recognize tuning in, and listeners tuning in recognize how great of an opportunity this is, how impactful it will be. But for these interns, what will be some of the learning outcomes that you guys anticipate for them?
Sure. So this is really just an amazing opportunity for students to work with really world-renowned experts in so many different fields, but especially in that science area. Just being able to be here on campus, come on campus and be a part of as we stand up this facility is a wonderful experience. So for the audience out there, NBAF has biosafety level 2 and 3 laboratories and is the first facility in the U.S. with biosafety level 4 or BSL-4 containment that's capable of housing large livestock, which will be the focus of our research here. So through research, diagnostics, and vaccine development and training, our mission at NBAF is to protect our country from transboundary, emerging, and zoonotic diseases that really threaten our food supply, agricultural economy, and public health. So this is an amazing opportunity for students to serve their country as part of a larger mission, play a role in protecting the agriculture industry, which of course we all know is very important to us here, especially in Kansas, and the food supply, of course, explore federal employment opportunities, and of course gain unique and valuable experiences as they start their careers.
Incredible. A one-of-a-kind opportunity, I think it's fair to say, especially as I feel like agriculture is kind of left out of the national security conversation sometimes. And it's a really important aspect of that I think we're seeing more and more today. We're realizing that.
It sure is. Absolutely.
I think that's one of the most beneficial aspects of this internship opportunity that people won't think about, right? That how does this broader mission of NBAF actually integrate in with the national defense priorities of the country? How often, as an undergraduate or graduate student, do you get the opportunity not just to work with world-renowned scientists and engineers, but to serve your country in that way and to gain a broad understanding of what it means to serve a mission and not do just a job day in and day out, right? It's pretty incredible. We're so fortunate.
We've talked about this internship now, all of the benefits of it, and I'm sure people listening are like, well, what will this internship maybe look like more so? When will these internships be taking place? And I know there's some diversity there as well, right?
That's correct. So we have a variety of different ways that people can actually participate in the internship program. So they can apply for a part-time internship, or they could do a full-time. They could do it for a summer semester, or they could do it for a longer fall or spring semester. And the difference between those is essentially 10 weeks for summer and 15 weeks for your traditional fall and spring semesters. So they can kind of think about what works best for them from both a learning and training and personal perspective, and then apply for the one that they think would be the best fit. When you combine that with the large number of options and experiences that NBAF is providing for them, there's a lot of opportunities out there for anyone from computer science, engineering, communications, and marketing, and your core bioscience as well.
Have listeners tuning in and they're thinking, well, I have a kid that I think will be interested in this, or students themselves are tuning in and hearing about this and thinking, wow, I have to apply. What really would be the ideal candidate for you guys?
Yeah, so we're looking for somebody who has some technical knowledge or expertise within the domain for the position that they're applying for. However, they don't have to have extensive experience. On the website, which is biokansas.org/internship, they can click on each of the positions that are available, and they can see what the actual competencies are that we're looking for them to have before they decide to apply. And they're really quite varied. But we're also looking, speaking back to the mission of NBAF, we're looking for somebody who wants to serve their country, that wants to be part of an impactful community. We want them to have a really strong interest in their field of study. We want them to be hardworking and a self-starter, and also be really committed to working on something bigger than themselves.
What a valuable role they'll play for sure, these interns. And I know that obviously the timeline of things for internships is really important for a lot of these kids when they're thinking at applying. So when will those applications really open? When will they close? What does that process look like?
Yes, we have multiple application cycles during the year. Right now, the summer application as well as the fall application are open. The deadline for the summer application is coming up in just a few weeks, so April 25th. And that would have a start date of June 5th. The fall deadline is May 15th, and the start date for that would be September 4th. And then the spring application opens on August 7th.
Wonderful. So plenty of time to plan for those fall and spring opportunities. But if you're looking to maybe do it this summer, that's something that they need to get onto as soon as possible, right?
That's correct. And if they have any questions about preparing their application, if they want guidance on preparing their CV or their resume, we're here to help them. They can reach out to us directly. Daniel, our director of impact here at BioKansas, can help walk them through that and make sure that they're confident in the way that they're applying for the position.
Wonderful. We'll be sure to include that contact information in our show notes later on the show. So look out for those if you are interested. And in terms of encouragement for these students, I think sometimes, opportunities as large as this can be intimidating sometimes. So if there's a student out there that's interested and kind of, well, maybe I'll apply, maybe I won't, what sort of encouragement do you have for them?
I think the most encouraging aspect of this opportunity is we're asking people to show up as their genuine, authentic selves and contribute to this mission. They can leverage their lived experiences, whether they come from an urban area or a rural area, and be able to have a really meaningful impact, not just on our nation, but themselves as a scientific, engineering, or communications or IT professional. And so it's very rare that people actually outwardly say, we want you for you and who you are. But when we bring all of that creative capacity together, the impacts that we can have are tremendous.
That's incredible. I wish I was a student still. I hear more and more about this opportunity. I'm like, sign me up. I want to come. If listeners are tuning in and they're looking for more information on this opportunity, they want to learn more, they want to potentially apply, where can they do that at?
They can apply directly from the program website, so biokansas.org/internship.
Wonderful. Well, I can't thank you enough for joining us today. I really appreciate it. And thanks for sharing this incredible opportunity for our students. I'm really thinking that a lot of people are going to hear about this and be inspired to apply. So thanks so much.
Thank you. We appreciate you having us.
Thank you. Our teams here are super excited to have some interns on board to help out their teams. So thank you.
Absolutely. Once again, everyone, those were Katie Pawlosky. She is the NBAF Communications Director, as well as Sonia Hall. She is the President and CEO of BioKansas, joining us to talk about their new STEM internships for underrepresented populations. If you're listening to us on the radio and are afraid you're going to miss out on our next segment because you're reaching your destination or have something else that you're having to switch to quickly here, don't forget the Agriculture Today programming is also available as a podcast. Our podcast is easily accessible on all podcasting platforms, including our website, agtoday.net, as well as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. You can simply search us on any podcasting platform, Agriculture Today, Kansas State, and we are more than likely to pop up, and you can follow us there. That way you can simply have us pop up in your regular feed on whatever platform you're using and listen to us more regularly that way. Once again, you can easily access that on agtoday.net or any podcasting platform by simply searching Agriculture Today, Kansas State. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be back with more ahead on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today, and we're ending today's show with this week's wildlife segment, as we always do on Mondays. And joining us for that this week is Joe Gerken, our K-State fisheries and aquatics specialist. So, Joe, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on National Wildlife Week. It's an exciting week for us all.
Absolutely, and we're talking about a very specific species of wildlife here today. We're talking about frogs and maybe some toads, too.
Sure. We're going to group them all together today. We're going to talk about frogs and toads. There's about 22 species in Kansas, so lots of fun things to talk about.
Yeah, and that's a surprising fact for me because that seems like a lot of diversity in our state where there's not a lot of water, really.
Sure. So they are widespread throughout the state, 22 species, and there's a wide range of them. So there's a little frog called a Blanchard's cricket frog that's about a half an inch long, all the way up to, most of us know, American bullfrogs. Those can be 1 to 1.5 pounds. People actually, there's a hunting season for them in Kansas. So you can go out, you can gig them, and you can eat them. So there's a harvest season for those frogs. So little guys all the way up to big bullfrogs.
Interesting. Frog hunting. I'll have to add that to my list of bucket list experiences, I guess. And I understand that there's some interesting behavior with them. There's ribbiting that we know, so ribbiting or croaking as it's called.
Yeah, so we start to hear the vocalization of these frogs, these anurans, frogs and toads. this time of year. And so once it starts to rain, a lot of times after a rain, you'll start to hear a lot of frog activity. And those frogs are almost always males that we're hearing, and they're singing love songs. They're making noise, ribbiting, trying to attract a female mate.
Sure, and I feel like life cycles of these animals are things that are commonly taught in schools, so obviously they start out as eggs, right, in our waterways.
Yeah, so these frogs and toads can lay anywhere from 1,000 to 20 or 30,000 eggs. So there's lots of eggs. I think most of us know that the eggs turn into tadpoles. Tadpoles survive in bodies of water, and it takes about 3 to 4 months for the metamorphosis process to occur. Tadpole grows up. Tadpoles can't regulate their eating, so they're eating nonstop, getting enough energy to metamorphose into a frog. And that takes, like I said, about 3 to 4 months for that process to happen.
Sure. And with so many of these potential animals in our water or ponds, is there any concern with having too many frogs?
Well, it's generally pretty hard to do. So most of our ponds have predators in them. So fish love to eat frogs. Other mammals like to eat frogs, like raccoons will eat a lot of them. You have bird predators. So they're laying thousands or tens of thousands of eggs. Those tadpoles are hatching from the eggs, and most of those are going to get eaten. So we generally don't have to worry about too many frogs. If there are a ton of frogs at our pond, that can be an indication of our fish population. So fish really like to eat tadpoles. If we have a lot of frogs in our pond, we might not have as many fish, or at least predatory fish, as we might want to have in a balanced pond system. So just something to keep in mind. The frogs can tell us things about a pond, not necessarily bad things if there are a bunch of frogs there, though.
And if on the opposite end of that spectrum, if we notice there's no frogs maybe in our ponds, is there ways to positively introduce that, or is that just something that happens naturally as a healthy pond develops?
Sure. So that goes back to those predators, right? A lot of times we won't see a ton of frogs because they're getting eaten. But we don't necessarily need to use our eyes. Sometimes we need to use our ears and go back to thinking about that croaking or ribbiting, right? So just because we don't see frogs, we need to think, do we hear frogs, right? So frogs can be really good at hiding. Some frogs live in trees, and so we won't really see them, but we will be able to hear them. So there are a couple things we can do. Keeping water available for them is really one of the beneficial things we can do. That's hard to do in the climate we've had in Kansas this past year, but hopefully we get some more water soon.
Absolutely. And if people are looking for some additional resources about frogs in Kansas, where can they find that at?
Well, there's a great resource is the Great Plains Nature Center. So I would reach out to them. If you want some more specific information, always reach out to your local extension agent. And we're always here to help too. So if you have a fun question, let us know. Happy to chat.
Absolutely. Some fun frog information from our K-State Fisheries and Aquatics Specialist, Joe Gerken, today. Thanks so much, Joe, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We'll be back with more tomorrow on Agriculture Today.